Hey, Sam here, Relove Guitars. Just kicking off, and yeah, it's whatever day it is, I don't know, Friday, and here we have Size, very nice Swamp Ash Telecaster, and it's a parts caster. The neck, I think, is, as I think I mentioned before, the neck is a Northwest Guitars, I can't remember now, Northwest Guitars. Anyway, yeah. So this is come down to me for a setup to get rid of some buzzing. Obviously, it looks like it wants to have a nice low action. That's what I can see about it so far. It's got a nice light. Well, it's a nice looking body, but it's very light. The whole thing is a pretty looking package. So it's going to be a good straightforward setup. I'm doing it right now because I can't bear to listen to Donald Trump. It's just, it's making me ill listening to him. Sorry if you're a great Trump fan and all the rest of it, but not my thing, not my taste, personal preference maybe. Anyway, look, the thing I've got here is I've got some lead, and the aim of this is to see if we can ballast out this Telecaster and get it to even out the balance a bit more. Now right now I don't have a strap in here. I seem to have a load of necks hanging around but no strap, and I'll go and get one of those in a bit. But anyway, well, let's just get on and see what we've got. So the first thing I'm going to do is just have an overall look at everything. So just kind of, and I think I'll wipe this board clean. Yeah. Wipe this board clean, and then just make any notes as I go along, which is how I like to do it. I've got a spare set of frets here that I can't remember why I cut them or what they were for, so they're sort of sitting around doing nothing at the moment. Okay, so we have, just as an observation out loud, I'll say it, we've got a nice rosewood neck, beautiful looking grain on this, very nice, satin finished, Swamp Ash, lightweight body, quite thick. I think that's the normal 44 millimeters, but very light because it's pine or ash or whatever, it's swampy stuff. Swamp ash, swamp pine, I don't know. Anyway, this is made by Mustard Guitars, so maybe, I don't know if that was maybe I'm getting it wrong. Mustard Guitars neck, that's the logo on it, but I thought Si said it came from Northwest Guitars, but maybe that's a brand of theirs, I don't know. Anyway, so what we've got is we've got a Telecaster Wilkinson bridge. As I say, not sure, can't remember who the pickups will buy. We've got brass saddles in pairs here, quite far back on this, so not a lot of adjustment room left. The springs are fully compressed on a couple of them, nearly fully compressed anyway. We've got tortoiseshell pick guard, everything hardware in chrome, nice split post tuners, which is a really nice, I like those, they just seem really sensible to me anyway. They look pretty good quality actually. Through body stringing and quite a nice looking steel. Looks stronger than, it looks a bit better, more substantial than your average chromed jack plate socket or jack socket. So yeah, all looking good. So let's just, I think we need to tune this thing up first of all, see where we are. One of these strings here has been compressed, so it looks like it's a bit weakened. Wouldn't be surprised if it breaks. Oh, I need to make two nuts. Okay, so just going to give it a little tug, see how much slack we've just put on it. I mean, it's been loosened off, so it's bound to have a bit of slack in it. So I'm just going to give it a little bit of pulling. I think I probably should stop the camera and just go and get the strap, or a strap, because I really do want to get a sense of how much Ooh, neighbours, how much lead we're going to need to get this thing balanced. Frets look nice, nicely finished. Okay, I'll just pause that there for a second, go and get a strap, see you in a minute. Right, so yes, here we are. Yep, it's wanting to dive. I mean, unlike an SG, it sort of stops at some point. So it's not the end of the world. It doesn't keep on diving, but so I don't think it's going to be that big a problem to solve. I think I mean, one of the difficulties with your Telecaster, of course, is you haven't got a lot of spare room to pile lead into it. We'll have a go and see. Somebody in our band suggested we play that. Two-Way Army. It's cold outside, which it really is. Alright, so what have we got? We've got nice finished fingerboard. It's a quality necklace. Feels good to play as well. Four position switch. Pull. So right away, what I'm seeing is quite a low action on here already. I'm not seeing too much in the way of choky, buzzy notes, just in normal playing. Pinging on the nut slots. Need looking at. First fret action looks pretty low. More pinging. That's nice guitar. I'm liking this. Very light though. Absolutely very light, so we need to give it some weight. So let's just go up through the notes and see. Well, first of all, let's take a recording of what the action is showing up at this point in time. Okay, so 1.5 on the last fret on the low E, and I would say can I see straight? Just under 1.5 on the high E, so I shall go low E, last fret, 1.5, high E, let's call it 1.3. I think we got a very flat, a very low first fret action. Very nice actually. Let's just have a feel at, just first of all, what are we getting in terms of the notes. Not bad. Wow. Okay. Well, okay, sorry for that little bit of run around there, not very interesting from the viewer's point of view, but what I have to say is yeah, ping. Hold the neck up. It's a little bit of string slap down here. So what I'm getting is all the notes are playing cleanly. Actually, I'm not getting any real, little bit of zzz on bends, right, massive bends, I mean huge ones. So we're kind of choking out massively, I mean when you make a huge bend, so there's a little bit of room for improvement there. And there's a bit of, slapping on the fingerboard there, which could just be caused by, for all we know, could be caused by no relief in the neck or not enough relief. We'll have a look and see. But it's a very nice neck. There's a bit of relief in there, but it's not huge amounts. Just make sure that's actually holding it against the fret there. A little bit. Yeah, not too bad. Of course, what I don't have is this right down at the lowest level. So let's let's now put it down a fraction. So we're on 1.5. I mean, I'm not going to want to go much below that, but let's just work the action down a tiny bit more. Yeah, so verdict so far, pretty good. Nice neck, pretty good condition, and I think I've just gone and taken the only one key, hex key that I need, and I think I've gone and taken it in the house, which will cause another pausation on the thing. But we might have one here. Let's just have a quick feel at that. See if it's the right ones. Yeah. Okay. So let's just have a look. 1.5 is a good target that I would be going for. I wouldn't want to mess with that too much. A little bit high on the E string side, so this may be where we get some issues showing up now. So I'll just take a little bit off these two. Okay, so 1.25-ish. What I'm seeing is we got actually quite low in the middle, so it's not following the radius accurately enough, I don't think, by the looks of it. So I think we need to crank this up a little bit. I'll just check it back again in a second. Okay, 1.2-ish, 1.2-ish, barely on 1. Okay, so this side needs to come up a little tiny bit more. So we'll lose the tuning, of course. Let's have a look, feel now. Nice tuners. Right, okay, well, I'm not finding a huge amount wrong with this. There's a little bit of slapping going on, but I just want to check these heights again. So that's smack on 1.5. That's a little lower already, and we're going down. So this could do with a tiny boost up this side. Half a turn. So we're going 1.5, maybe a little bit less, 1.5, but we'll go down a tiny bit. Quarter of a turn this time. So 1.5, under 5, 1.25, just over 1. Blimey, that's almost under 1. This one's low. Okay, that's just dead on 1, that's gone up again. So if we're going to respect the radius, we've got to I'm making a gradient down to the desired, between 1.5 and down to 1, basically. So it's actually quite a lot. It's more curvy on this bridge than perhaps think to begin with. So in a way, if you think we've got the radius of the thing, we're kind of doing a bit, not that exactly, we're doing a bit that. So what I am hearing is that little buzz, and I think Sai did mention something about possibly needing to replace the nut, and I think there may well be an issue here with the slots are too low. So whoever put it together may have just overcut them. Should really only be a problem, more of a problem on open notes, obviously. I think so I put a note in the front of here, which I will, well not in the front, but I will consult it, see what it tells me. Okay, full fret adjustment set up. It's been set up as best as possible, get lots of some fretting out above the 12th when I bend a long way. Yes. Action height is good at the mo, allowing the strings to resonate. Please confer with me on that. String gauge. Okay, so yeah. Second string trio as well, yeah, possibly. I've got some spares. Actually, that's enough of, I don't know, maybe the G is a little bit flat. Yeah, it won't hurt to put a second string tree in, only that there is a bit of compromising, it occasionally compromises the tuning fraction, but we'll put some grease on it and hopefully lubricate it. Okay, so the action height of 1.5 on the end was good. Yeah. Set up as best as possible. So what I'm thinking is my findings, a bit of slap hitting the frets down here, and that could be because it might need a little bit more what's that word, you know, the leafy stuff than it's got. If I can find my thing, it's got some, but I suspect it's very little. So let's look at 0.25, and I don't think we'll get a 0.25 under, excuse me, under there. No, we won't. So it's quite little. I think let's try 1.5. Just about 0.15, very small amount. It's something I might consider playing with too. It's not too bad, but we might want the tiniest bit more. It's just what I thought. So I'm going to go with a little bit more if we're getting a bit of zing. Yeah, and but yeah, what I found, some fretting out above the 12th, but only on full bends. And Si, you must have cast iron fingers because I can't bend the strings as far as you, but I can tell that when we get up there, it's getting there. Yeah, it's bending out on the E particularly, fretting out on the E. So that will be a matter of getting these things level. They look a little bit flattened as if they've been worked on before, maybe a little bit, maybe in the first instance when they were fitted. Wouldn't surprise me, that's what I would do anyway. But like I said, this thing here is the bit that's another bit that's bothering me, and I think that's pretty low. That's that's below the level of the capo really. Yeah, it's way lower than I would be comfortable going. In fact, it's probably somewhere around 0.1. I always said, and it was a, there you go. That G is barely above 0.1, so 0.1 of a millimetre over the first fret is way too low for my liking, and particularly I suppose if if you're hitting it quite hard, it's not gonna like it on open strings. You're gonna get that sort of buzz happening down here, and probably first and second fret even. So my kind of feeling is, the thing is, it's interesting because when you capo it, you're back to, basically when you capo it, it's like your nut is cut like this one is, if you get my drift. So when you capo guitar with the height at about 1.5 down here, you're getting a very, very small, maybe 0.15 millimeters over the new first fret. So kind of similar to how you've got it there, which is sort of what you get when you're fretting it as well, if you get what I mean. So you fret it here and you've got about 0.15 there. Obviously that will increase if your bridge is taller, and that will be a bigger gap there. But on a standard setting, on pretty low action, you'll get that angle. There are two ways to, well, I guess one way to make it bigger is to put a little bit of bow in there, but obviously that kind of cancels it out when you get up here, because the neck is rising back up at this point, because the neck really only curves between here and here. On these it curves, on a Les Paul it curves between there and there. Anyway, so what we've got is an action which is pretty close to where Cy had it. So we'll fret level it. I'm setting it a tiny bit lower on the high E, just to kind of push the fret leveling so that it makes me do it as accurately and as not hard, but as precisely as possible. If it still struggles to get those massive bends, and I'm going to just note this. This is a 15th fret up to 15 up to 18 chokes on the high E. So I'm just giving myself something to reference there. So in a way that's what I want to like to be able to free that up just a minute, but you have to really press hard to get it to do anything. So there we go, that's the request. And then we've got the balancing, which is definitely a little bit on the neck heavy side, and so the question is, where can we fit some lead pipes? Right, okay, so what I'm going to do, yes, Cy says here could hang lead off the strap button to start with to see how much it needs, and that's what I would do. We've got some here, and I get some sticky tape onto it. The question is where, and it's all very well balancing it with weight, but where do we put it? If we find the right amount, where do we actually put it? So I would get a piece of sticky tape, whack it on there. I could drill some holes in it, but I don't really want to do that just yet. So you can see what I've got. I might as well cut those because I'm not going to fit anything that size in there. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 chunky bits, a couple of little bits, and a couple of bags. A couple of bags of shot. I don't have a string bag to put it all in, to dangle it off, so I'll have to come up with some other clever receptacle. Find one. Right. It's also slightly different. Hanging a weight off the back here is different from where we're actually going to end up putting it, which is at best going to be somewhere in here. So whatever goes in the back here, sort of, I guess it has a bigger effect the further back it is, so you need a smaller weight. The further back you go, the smaller the weight you'd need to counterbalance. I think that would be a fairly logical thing to conclude. Right, and this neck's looking really dry as well, so we'll give it a good oiling when it comes round to thinking it, putting it back together. It's a little bit. We might just try and reposition the neck as well, because it's just a little bit out of alignment. So a bit of a kind of pulling before we tighten up will probably straighten it out. And I need to find, we'll see if we've got a free strap nut. This is, funnily enough, they sent me a whole load of left-handers, but since I always take them down quite a bit anyway, it doesn't really matter. I'll just end up shaving it backwards. It's the same thing, just starts off with a slant in the wrong direction. So I have to get the other one out, which is quite a tricky operation, or can be. But I don't want to get it out. Do I? Yeah, I do want to get it out just now. It's all a bit back to frontish, because normally I'd like to just get on at this point and do the fret leveling, but of course in my scheme of things I can't do that until I've got this nut correct. Turn that off. Yeah, so I've been busy today. I've done 4 guitars. This is the 4th. To be fair, the first 3 were finishing off. One was 2 of them were my own guitars, and one of them was Bob's SG, Epiphone SG, and just was tidying that up, ready for return hopefully this weekend. And that's been refretted completely. So I was just doing some tidying up on that, and then for my 2 I was just doing a very light final fret level on my Strat, my Encore Strat. Now these are sacrificial strings, so I don't really mind what happens to them right now, so I can pull them quite a bit out of the way. And I could do with some green garden wire if I remember where that ended up. Which of course I do. Oh yes, I do. Here it is. Grovel on the floor for it. Comes in handy when you want to yank a piece of string out the way. Yeah, so I took my Encore Strat with the Graham maple neck. I took that and my Oakcaster number 12, which is the Hollyoak one. I took both of those to rehearsals last night, and give them a good workout. And the Strat was almost perfect, except for just a couple of tiny little chokes on bends like this, really. So I came and gave that a little fret level, sort of another one I should say. And the Oakcaster was pretty good. Again, with a couple of little zings, and I gave that a little light fret level as well. So okay, so this is a little tool that was given to me by I can't say Burgess, but it's Chris Barker, and it's a nice little custom made kit. It's getting a bit loose now, so I'm going to have to sort of splurge some, I don't know, resin on there or something. And what it is, it's a little gentle hammery chisely thing. And the idea is I want to be able to loosen, or try and loosen, this nut. But this is a very fragile area here, so it's actually quite easy to split a piece of that off, and I've done it many a times, and I've seen lots of other people who've done it too. I'm just trying to see if we've got it moving. We haven't got it moving yet, so I'm going to do a couple more taps. It's quite nerve-wracking because you've got to do enough to get it moving to break the super glue seal, but obviously not so much you knock a whole piece off here, which would be a bit distressing. So obviously you want to probably put more force on this side. Just hope that gets it going. If it does, you should find that you can start to drift it out sideways. I'm just supporting the neck a little bit with my body, actually, just to So unfortunately it's not cooperating with me. I mean, it's obviously a nice fit. There's a little bit of space under there, so my next approach is going to be to go under there with a very, very fine screwdriver, which isn't going to be that one, it might be that one. I'll just find the tiniest thing on earth. This one. I kind of prefer not to do it, but if we don't get any movement at all, then there's already a gap here where the nut was inserted, so we can do a little bit of, there you go, that's good. Yeah, just a little bit of push, and it's a bone nut, but like I said, it's been cut too low unfortunately. Now we could just shim it, but I prefer not to. I prefer to just go with the new one and work with that, which is quite a bit higher, and obviously there'll be a bit of working to do on there, particularly as it's running backwards. What I will do before I replace it is I'm gonna, if I can find the thing, I just want to clean out the slot best I can. So I will use my, I probably need to put some more sandpaper on there. Shouldn't take a second. But since I don't use these fret rockers anymore as fret rockers, I tend to use them as perfect slot cleaning devices. So that's good for cleaning the sides and edges of it. But if you think you've got some goo along the bottom interfering with things, I mean, you can do it like this, or you can put some clean sandpaper on there and just kind of file away with it, or saw away with it. It's not too bad actually. I can feel a bit of super glue. I'm just trying to move it a little bit there. You can also do, if you've got one to hand, and I had some but they've now gone walking. Did I move everything out of the way? I must have done, yeah. If you've got a blade, you can just kind of get in there and just press it down the sides, and it's good for getting rid of crunchy stuff. You can hear it, it's a super glue from old. Again, if it's really stubborn, a chisel can do that. But you can hear it's just scraping some glue on the bottom of the slot. And then we try out our back to front at the moment nut, and the slot is just about right, but it's got a bit tight in the middle. Again, that would benefit from a little bit of chisel application, or a bit of this. I don't want to dig down too far in the slot. And I can see that it's got a bit of glue built up on the front edge there. We just need it to big enough to slip it in there. Again, there's a bit of unevenness I can see. So if I was being very careful, get it out again. The good thing about a chisel blade is that it's quite a nice rigid surface. So if you've got some build up on the edge, you can usually sort of, it'll take away any crunchy bits for you. Just running it basically along the slot. Given that there's a bit built up in there, what I'm going to do is just put a little bit more, I'll just put another layer of this stuff over the top for a second. Alright, this is taking a bit longer than I would have hoped. This is thickening it up a bit, but that's okay. I think it will just fit inside the slot. So I'm going to put this nut in as soon as I can get this done, and then once the nut is in, then we'll cut the slots, and then we'll go back to setting the action and then fret leveling. So I'm just tidying up this little bit here. Get rid of that. Okay, so the quick freshened up cutting edge, and again just fitting in there. Clean it out nicely. I really want to get into the bottom of the slot if I can. That's where the grubby stuff is. Very gently or very firmly push it through, and we should get a nice easy fit, and it's still rocking a bit in the bottom there, so there's some build up of something that we have to try and scrape out. Quite hard to see, it's not exactly visible, but you have to be very careful with the slots, partly because they're breakable, and B, they're breakable, but they also you can scratch either side of them really easily. Right. That's pretty close, a tiny bit more. So that's nice and fits nice and easy. It's still not quite a square bottomed, excuse the expression, square bottomed hole. It's a shame because you never get it to look absolutely perfect. That's what we really want. First of all, that's never perfectly square. It never gets right into the corners, which is the frustrating bit. I'll try my best to square off the corners. So just cleaning any glue out that's built up right in the corner that stops the thing sitting, or the angle I should say, not the corner. Alright, just about there. Yeah, good. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll get some super glue, and I'm going to fix this in place. A little clamp, a little bit of rubber, a little bit of super glue, high viscosity. Now this is again very difficult to apply without getting it everywhere you don't want it. So often, rather than use the pot, I tend to try and use some other device and lay it in the hool with some other means. Doesn't need a lot really, just enough to seal its fate. But you can see that's a bit more of an accurate way of handling it than to stick it either on the nut itself, which is liable to sort of spill over the edges when you try and do anything. If you're trying to move it, it'll kind of spill over onto the rosewood. Okay, so we go straight down in here. Now this is an interesting bit of game here. It's kind of eyeball time to be sure we've got the right spacing, which I can see we pretty much have. And then it's a case of let us get a bite on it in the middle and just hold it in place. Now you can see there's loads of height, so we're going to be cutting away quite a lot. Sometimes I guess people might think, well, why do you not take away more from underneath? In a way it's true, but I've been caught out many times when you start doing that and sometimes you just go a fraction too far and you've kind of lost the whole nut, or you have to reshim the whole thing. So I would rather spend a bit longer cutting downwards from above than run the risk of miscalculating, and because this is very difficult to measure in that space down there. So it's very, actually I can see these have been fret leveled before. You won't be able to see it with this, but there's a distinct pattern. I can show you what it looks like on the whitey board. So you have the what's the fret edge, right? Okay, so we have the fret tang there and the thing there, and we have the thing there like that. And when it's been levelled, what you tend to see is something that looks like that. And this looks all sort of nice and kind of rounded, and this looks a little bit flatter. Sometimes you can even see the grain or the marks of the, or even sometimes in this case you might even see, it looks like you can see the marker pen that was used to mark the frets up. I doubt that's the case, but it's a little bit of a telltale. So that's the flattened bit from previous fret leveling. And actually what's happened is it was probably flatter before, it's more like that, and then somebody's used a fret leveling file, a concave file, and it's taken off, it kind of rounds off this part here, and it's probably brought the line in closer like that. And you often get the first part of the fret tends to be sort of rounded off like this. It's a bit difficult to show, but it's quite common. And then you get the little, what would be the left line, the line that the person leaves as the untouched part of the fret. It's very difficult to describe, especially when you can't see at such magnification. Okay, so what we've got to do, let's put the lead to one side. I'm going to go and, or at some point I'm going to find a device for hanging weights off it. But the real question is not so much how much weight, is where we put it. So under here, obviously there's no space. There's probably a one little channel. Your only spaces are going to be here, and they're minimal. So it's kind of limited, so that's the slight downside. Okay, just going to move that. Now we can undo this. Let's just chop it off. Yeah, I had that problem with my, I think Si was referring to, or had seen the Harley Benton Telecaster kit that I made, and I did fill it with, or put quite a bit of lead in it, or wherever I could, but it was a bit of a task finding space. So now we've got a massively high playing action for the first fret. So I'm going to cut these slots down. We know the action's set where we want it. I'm going to take we've got a bit of relief at about, I can't remember what it was now, but we had enough, just enough. It wasn't, I don't think the relief was the issue. So now we've got this brand new high nut. Yeah, that G sticks up quite high. Right, so my target on this would be 0.3 over the first fret rather than the 0.1 that it's at. And so that becomes a bit of a dreary process. It's just going to require a bit of filing away, and to do that I'm going to work off we're going to use a set of 10s that Si wants. So I'm going to take the measurements, or the choice of my nut files is going to come from the gauge of strings that he wants. And I always go above so that I get plenty of room. There's lots of leeway, tolerance, leeway, whatever. There's lots of scope. You can go, if that says 10, then I'm going to go 13 as my first one, that kind of thing. So 13 I'm going to go 17, 17 I'm going to go 24, 26 I'm going to go 32, 36 I'm going to go 42, and 46 I'm going to go 48 with a bit of sandpaper probably to widen it. So it's always above, because my experience has shown that if you go dead on the gauge, you'll always strangle the strings, matron. So to get this to get the slots cut, I'm going to tune the guitar up even with the strings miles high. And the reason I want it in tune is not because the note doesn't matter really. I just want the strings under normal playing tension. Close to. Right. So when I cut the slots, I want the strings under tension, under full playing tension, so that there's no risk of them sticking halfway down the slot. That's the main thing. Okay, so I got my schedule of files out. When I've released an ebook recently, and in it I show how to do the whole of the slots with this £1 file instead of this £50 set. But since I've got them, I end up using them. But these days I tend to use a combination of both, especially where I've got quite a lot of material to take down, like this. So I'll start with the D, and it's quite a long way down. So where's my thingy? I shall get my feeler gauge, and we'll go for 0.3 as my target, the most used one here. And you can see now it's about 2 millimeters above that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start cutting a big slot in here for the time being. Now, I don't think you can see all right. I'm going to require sort of patience. I'm going to try and keep this as wide as possible, or as flat as possible I should say, sorry. Most of this material at the top here I'm going to take away afterwards with a Dremel or a file. So all I'm interested in first is, first of all, cutting a slot to take the overall height down, and then as we get closer to it I'm going to work with the nut file to finish it off so that we get the right file profile at the bottom. But right now the big slot is just to take it down. Now, the truth is, you can carry on and do the whole thing with this V file, and your guitar will, surprisingly enough, play really well. I've not noticed any issues at all. But you know, some people are very purist about it and get a bit upset about that. If you've got £1 and you haven't got 50 quid, then you can do it really well, and I recommend people try it and see just how much a difference it makes or not. So you can see the, I don't know if you can, let's drag you in here. If you can see the sort of scale of that slot at the moment. Everything above that, the bottom of the notch, everything above that is going to need to be taken away. You don't need it, it's excess material. So I'm going to now use the nut file to just finish off this slot. And when I come to this part, I'm tilting just slightly backwards, then doing a few strokes of the thing and stopping. So I'm kind of close to, I get nearish to the mark, and then I let the file kind of do the last bit. And then once the string sits in there at the correct height, which is nearly there now, then I can, when they're all done, I can take all the strings off and just then reshape this nut and take all the excess material off, and we'll have a nice custom finished flat, quite low nut. So we're almost there on this, and I'm just gently moving the file a little bit side to side so that there's a bit of fresh air under there, but you know what, it's very close. I'm going to stop there. So that's realistically, you can put a 0.3 under there and it just about plays. You might even just get a 0.4 under there, but that's okay by me. That's hardly any different. Let's try it. No, so it's between 0.3 and 0.4, which is great. Doesn't have to be absolutely precise, that's close enough. And we move on to the A, and again tune that up. Again, first of all, quick visual check, and you can see miles of fresh air, so we know it's a bit of a slog with the V-shaped thing. These things, they're great for £1, but they do wear out fairly soon, so in not too distant future I'll be looking for another one on eBay for another £1 somewhere. They're quite difficult to clean, I've found. Loads of room. If you're feeling really brave, you could cut the first guide slots with a Dremel disc, but you'd have to be extremely brave to do that, and trust that you aren't going to go down and hit the rosewood or go way below the mark. Okay, so check, visual, play it, go again. So remember, in one of these things they taper towards the end, so sort of to get an even widest possible slot, you need to kind of end up using this back part of the triangular blade. And it's much better to stop, check, do a little bit more. So just a boring little process here, but very important. It's dusty at that end at the moment, but obviously once we're there, we can blow some fresh air in there and get rid of all of the dust. Okay, still a gap. I'll do a little tiny bit more with the V file, and then I will go in with the nut file, just check. Okay, so always stopping with plenty of room to allow the V file into action, I should say. Still about 0.2 left to go. And always when I'm using the nut files, I'm tilting backwards about 5 to 10 degrees, because we want the string to come up the back of the nut and off the top. At the moment it looks a bit odd because it's a left-handed nut, so the slope is actually going that way at the moment, but once we clean it up, it'll the actual cut or the slot in here is going the correct way. It's no problem using a left-hander, considering that we're going to reshape it anyway, because most of it's surplus. Now sometimes you get this, you can get the blade starts to get held, and that's when you risk, when you're doing these nut files, it's then you can risk overcutting, because you start really having to push the thing hard. So if you can at all times you just get it moving again as lightly as possible, that's the best thing for it. It's one of the things that I had a good experience with. Sean came round, a customer who bought the ebook. I think I might have said this on another video, but anyway, he came round the other day after having used the ebook to start a setup on his guitar using the methods in the ebook, and he got a certain way into it and then stopped, and rang up and asked if he could come over and get some advice on finishing it off, and it was very useful. you know, he came over and we got into it, and I went through it all again with him, and it was very good because he could see where he'd sort of lost a bit of confidence in what he was doing, and actually it was interesting because I'll stop on that point there. It just got to a point where he was using a bit too much force with the truss rod fret leveling tool. And I think he'd kind of known at the time that he was, so it's really good to have that experience of knowing when it's too much. And it's the same with these nut files. You can't describe to somebody when you've reached a point you're using a bit too much pressure, and that was kind of just getting there at that point. So the temptation would be to carry on pushing the file, and in actual fact what really needed to happen was I needed to take off some of the material above and clear the way. So it was just approaching the too deep a slot to really comfortably work in, and the temptation is to sort of start pushing harder, when in fact what you need to do is clear some space and remove some material, and suddenly you'd basically free up the slot, and the file will suddenly start moving freely again. So I think it's whenever you're doing it, I think carpenters always say, don't they, let the saw do the work, and if an experienced carpenter will spot when somebody's pushing too hard, or apprentice or a trainee is working the saw too hard, they know that something's wrong, and they also know that the cut's going to go around a corner and get very difficult at that point. Okay, so again, checking all the way. I sometimes use a little piece of string to lift these strings up, because they can get quite difficult to pull out and you end up breaking fingernails if you have them. So we've got this one to do tonight for Si, and do some lead experiments as well. And then in the bag down there, what I've also got, this is where I do need the string. Let's find the bit of string. That's easier said than done. In that case, I think it's time we made another piece of string from somewhere. Let's chop a piece of string off something. Dun, dun, dun. Piece of string. Loose spare bit of string, that will do. Thank you. Yeah, so handy bit of string, lift the string out, there you go. Yeah, so I've got, once we've done this one, I've got a Sun Mustang, oh, sorry, not Sun Mustang, an Encore Strat from India. Came from the same factory as the Sun Mustangs, and that's come over from Martin in Germany, and I'm in the process of reshaping the headstock and having some fun souping it up basically, and I think I found a really good template for doing that. A really classic vintage sounding looking Strat for not very much money. Okay, so I'm still working with the triangle file, and I don't have a lot of room. That's the only downside at this point. I don't have too much spare room with this peg in the way. I'm going to have to switch to the nut file in a second. Yeah, we're nearly in that department anyway, so get me a spare bit of string. So yeah, the Indian made Sun Mustangs and the Encores from the same factory of the same era, they're turning out to be really nice guitars. In fact, the Encore is turning out to be more modifiable, more fun to modify than the Sun Mustangs. The Sun Mustangs have, the pickup routes are a little bit, they're very particular, and they're cut only to accommodate the Sun Mustang pickups. so you can't really easily upgrade the pickups with something nicer without recutting some routes, and that means either going crazy with a router or getting handy with a chisel, which can be a bit ragged at times and take quite a while to do. But the Encore is a very similar body, a little bit thinner, just as good looking, just as useful to work with, and it has the routes. Oops, well, that wasn't quite what I wanted to do, but it has the routing already slightly larger, and it will take modern pickup upgrades. So I'm just checking all the while. I can see it's still quite a big gap. Sometimes it's easy to back off on the low E. Something about it that kind of encourages you to quit early, but we don't want to do that, because the low E being too high off the first fret can really mess up the way it plays. And there's a little bit more. I'm giving it a little bit more room at the low E, the A and E progressively, but not much, not a huge amount. So I'm just trying to gently get down there. So you can see how long this takes. Very close now. I'm going to stop there on those, and you can probably start. You can see how much material we've got left to take off the top. Now with the high strings, just going to drop off the B and the E, and then we'll work on the G. So I'll get these three slots out of the way, nut files I should say. Then we'll just move the G off to one side. We know we've got quite a way to cut down first. This first cut is quite important. It's always the deepest. I know that's... Who sang that? Rod Stewart? Anyway, it's important to make sure this is in a nice straight line along the neck. When you're cutting a big notch like this, it'd be too easy to go off in one direction. That's a group, isn't it? Joke. Right, so this time I'm measuring in from the side. Still loads of room. You know, logically, if I'd have taken off loads from the bottom first, this would be a bit quicker. But I somehow just feel much more confident coming down from the top instead of coming up from the bottom. So coming up from the bottom involves measuring and trying to ascertain tiny little increments to take off with using a sanding block, whereas this way we're kind of looking down on it and it seems pretty logical. Okay, so at this point I'm going to switch to the file, and again this is the point where I make sure it's just tipping backwards a little bit, and I'm going to keep it running as smooth as possible. A bit of waggling. Not far off. Now, some people kind of think, well, what happens if? How do you avoid going wrong at this point? And the truth is, you just don't. You will sometimes go wrong. The amounts of the measurements of the size of the space we're dealing with here is so small that you're almost certain go wrong. That's almost spot on. It's a tiny bit. I'm going to take one whisker further, like that. Yep, I think I'll do. How much gap is there? It's very close. I don't want to mess with it. Yeah. So how do you know? Well, you practice it really. And you mess up sometimes, so the only advice I would ever have is have a spare nut or two. Have a spare nut or two handy, and if you buy your nuts from China, they'll only be £1 or so, or two per nut. If you buy them in the UK, obviously you're paying more expensive price, but from China in bulk. You have to plan ahead, obviously, because they take 3 weeks to arrive. But yeah, good and cheap, and you know, just be prepared to trash them and learn, and then replace them and have another go. And that's a small price to pay for learning and practicing. But you will overcut them sometimes, and when you do, you can either knock it out and replace it, at which point, you know, the less glue that you've used to secure it in place, as long as it's in place, the less glue the better, because you'll get it out again easier. Or you have a couple of other options for getting out of jail free, and that is to either fill the slot with a mixture of super glue and bicarb of soda, which together make a sort of clear cement, and you can recut that as if it were bone. It's not the same same consistency, but it's not too bad, and it cuts quite well. And that will get you out of a hole, and you can literally fill the slot until the string's back up to above the problem, and then just cut back down again to where you want it to be using the same method, hopefully this time stopping a fraction before. So that's one way, and the other way is you could knock out the whole nut and then shim it, and that will lift all of the slots a little bit higher. So it means all the ones that you've already achieved, all those 4, would suddenly be too high, and you'd have to work them all again a little bit. But you could do that. Cause a bit more work. A lot of the time I'm guided by the shadows of the strings on the underlying fret, and it can be quite accurate, tell me when I'm at the right place. So I think I'm there. Okay, so I'm down to my last one. Here we go. Like I say, the nut looks a bit of a big toothy mess at the moment because it's got way too much material on it, but you know, once we've done the precision fret level, then we can take the sacrificial strings off, these old strings, and when they're off, while they're off, we can take care of this excess material and just sand it off. Or I'm not sure I've got any more of those little Dremel drum things, which I think I do actually. I'll just find one for the job, and that will just reshape it into whatever. We'll just make it a nice flat, low profile looking thing. Okay, so where are we? We're about another millimetre off, quite a way. It can feel, when you're near the edge of a nut like this, it can feel quite daunting because you're cutting away and you've got this big toothy bit sticking up there, and it looks like it wants to come off, but it won't. Right, where are we? So I'm going to make with the file. This is 10 up to 13, and it's quite close. So it's a very, very small slot, and I'm pretty sure it'll be sticky on 13, even though you'd think that would be perfect size for it. Okay, let's have a check now. Still more. Okay, let's go work on with the nut file. Make sure I've got the right cutting edge. There's always a blank bit, a sort of handle on these things. Getting down, getting down. They're also very, very fine, so they're quite hard to hold. Sometimes you can end up kind of crimping them or bending them if you're not careful. In a way, you have to reset your mind from this side where you use quite a fair bit of force to this side where you've really got to you're going to kind of lighten up and go on basis of gentle repetition more than force. Because when if you press too hard with one of these, you suddenly go past your point of no return too quickly. So we're getting very close. If you vary your angle too much, you will find yourself dropping through that point as well, because you can easily take the edge off the front of the nut and suddenly drop down quite dramatically because of the change of angle. The string suddenly sits very quickly lower. So it's important to be consistent with the angle you take. Just a little tiny smidgen more. A little bit more still. There's so tiny amounts coming out there. I'm going to stop there. That is so close to the mark. Alright. Phew. I always get nervous because once you put in all the time and effort to do 5 of them correctly and you're on the last one, it's like that. It's like that. I'm nearly home and now I'm going to go and crash my car. Right, so here we are. It looks very toothy at the moment, so we're obviously not going to leave it like that. I'll just tune it for a second. I'm also listening, once I've done the slots again, I'm now listening for pings all the time. If it tunes perfectly without pinging, it means providing you've got rid of all your slack in your new strings, that and these unpinging smooth running slots means you'll have perfect tuning. So I'm listening for yeah, it's a bit better actually. It's freed up that end. That's good. Okay, so like I say, we've got plenty to slice off a bit later on. So that's that bit taken care of. So we've got the action we want. We've got we don't know about intonation yet. We'll worry about that later. We've got the action we want. We have good first fret action now. We've got the amount of relief we want. So the next part of this game, believe it or not, is to slack all these off again, just for a second. Now we could take advantage of if we slack them off. I'm taking the strings off because I want to paint the frets with marker pen to do the fret leveling. You could do the nut now, but strings are still going to be kind of in the way, so it's much better to have this free and tape it off later on and have a good go at reshaping the nut without anything in the way. The less they got in the way, the better. And like I say, it means you can mask off the neck around it so it doesn't damage it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark up these frets ready for our fret leveling, and as Si will know because he's obviously seen my videos, but if you're seeing this for the first time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to level the frets with the neck fully strung and with a slight bend in it, i.e. the amount of curvature that we call the neck relief that we already saw. And it's very small, but it's still a curve. So the neck isn't flat, it's curved, and we're gonna level frets with the neck curved and it's a bit of a head mangler to think of it. And there are several reasons why this is a better way to do it. It is a tiny bit more accurate than doing it with the neck flat and a normal familiar flat leveling beam. So it's a little bit more accurate than that, but that's not the main reason I do it. I mean, it's nice that it's a fraction more accurate, and the reason it's more accurate is because when you level it like this, you are leveling with the effects of string compression on the neck, which is slightly different and puts the frets in a different alignment than when you passively level the neck and level with a flat beam. So for that reason it's a little bit more accurate, but the main reason is, as you'll see as we do it, is that it's the only way to level frets without and take the least amount of material off as is humanly possible. And given that fret material is fret life or guitar life, it makes sense to preserve as much as possible. Now here again, this is about tuning it to roughly to pitch. It's not critical. We're going to move the strings around a little bit, and that's going to change the load on the neck, but we want it to be more or less under normal load. So I'm going to re-look at the string tree at the end. On my oak casters, which although they're fitted to the body like kind of in a Les Paul angle, because I use a Les Paul wraparound bridge, they have this, they're built on a basic Strat neck. And so, you know, every time I build one, I keep thinking, well, should I put a string retainer or retainers on this side? And I've done it a couple of times, and all it's done is just slightly interfered with the tuning. It hasn't really given me any perceptible improvement. So let's get this leveled and set up without it, and let's have a look at it at the end. And if it really desperate for it, because of course there's no turning back. If you do a second string tree, you've kind of built yourself another hole. You put another hole and you can't undo it unless you want to fill it, but you kind of you've made a commitment to go ahead and use that string tree even if you don't like it, or probably more importantly, even if you start to find that it does have a detrimental effect on the tuning. Now, what I'm going to do while we're here, so this is a bit of a long drawn out video, I'm going to have started more recently, when I come to do these fret levelings, I've started more recently to replace the sandpaper a lot more frequently than in previous times. It seems to be a good economy. No, what's the opposite of a false economy? You know, makes sense. So I've used this for maybe 2, possibly even 3 I think. And I'm going to scrape off. I can be quite rough with it, as long as I don't massively gouge it out. But you could be here forever trying to pull off the peel this off. It won't come off very easily. So I'm taking off the self-adhesive sandpaper, and I'm going to pull down my stuff from the shelf, and I'm going to stick some more on. Right, so that's maybe 2 or 3 fret levels out of a single strip. And I think in the past I would have made that last a bit longer. I don't think it's doing me any favours. I think it's a much better job with it refreshed every now and then. Okay, so what I need to do, I remember where I just put my blade. So I'm going to cut a strip of this self-adhesive sandpaper just a bit wider than the flat bottom of the truss rod. I mean, I can always end up wasting a little bit here, but Okay, and that's longer and wider. So then I'll take off the backing. This is 400 grit. I've got some 220 grit, which I probably will end up using at some point when I run out of this, but 400 works really well, and it's obviously more forgiving and a bit slower than 220. I'd be confident using 220, but having said that, I'm comfortable using 400 because it's slower and, as I say, more forgiving. So it's a little bit wasteful, but it's not exactly the world's greatest expense either, and this will continue to last me quite a while. So having stuck that on the bottom, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut across the top like that, and then I'm going to slice my way down the edge till I get down to the handle, and this will get binned. Once I've done the fret levelling and we've got the height and the action, everything, the setup part of it done, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to obviously take strings off. We'll take care of the nut profile, and while we've got things undone, just to kind of check everything over, but also we'll have a look in the cavities and under the hood and see what kind of room we've got for lead, because from experience I suspect it's going to be tight in the Telecaster world. Should be a bit of a problem, but we'll get as much into it as possible, and I managed to do it with my high Benson one, so it is possible. Okay, let's get these out of the way as well. Okay, so what we've got is the guitar in the playing action that we want, knowing that there is a bit of unevenness in the frets, and it's enough at the moment to cause some of the bends to choke a little bit. So the aim of this fret leveling game now is to, with the guitar in its playing configuration, is to create relatively level frets such that it'll just allow us to do those bends without choking. And then of course part of the process is to round them off, reprofile the frets, because we'll put a little bit of a flat on them. We'll reprofile them and then we'll polish them back up to shine, and then that setup part will be done, and we can take off those strings, chuck them away, and get on to worrying about the lead in the belly and reshaping the nut. Okay, so the fret leveling bit, I'm going to use this brilliant technique that I learned from somebody else, and it's a way of leveling the frets in the playing configuration. So these three little feet, I'm going to spread them equidistant, which wasn't that. So it's usually there. Why isn't it there for? Okay. Put them equally spread, and they've all, obviously I need to not put them further apart than the actual truss rod is. So, and then what I do is I lower the truss rod onto the two at this end. So I'm holding it as like a pivot hinged at this end, and I lower it down and see what happens. Now if it touches the middle one first, it means that the rod is more curved than the neck. If it touches the end one first, it means the rod is flatter than the neck. Now in this case I can see it touching the middle one and moving it, and not moving the end one. So if I bend down, I'm bending the rod onto it and it will move both, but I'm feeling it when it's its first point of touch. So this is too curved at the moment, and I'm going to find my truss rod, no, my Allen key. I'm just going to let out some of the curve in this, and if you were to look at your truss rod, you'd see the curve running down it now. And again, I try it again and I touch it down, it's still too curved. I probably should have flattened it out before I put the self-adhesive sandpaper on it, but you can see I pressed down quite hard and it still went back into a curve, so it's pretty good at holding its shape. Okay, so now I am touching it down. I can hear it hitting the end one now, and it's moving the middle one too, and I think that's about spot on. So what it means is, and this is something that does take experience and having done it a few times, but now I know that the truss rod is mapping the curve of the neck precisely, so that when I put the when I move these things out of the way, drop off the E string, spread the E and the B string out here to clear this track, I take my freshly laundered truss rod thingy and put it on here. Now I know that if I know that these two things, the curve on these, are both matching each other precisely, and just with gravity, if I just now move this backwards and forwards in what I call the E track, which is this sort of space we've created by moving the E string out of the way. If I just run it up and down a little bit without pressing down, I'm just letting gravity do the work, and then I stop and just let me plug in for a second. And sorry about that. Are you still running? Yeah. So what we do at this point is we try and have a look and see what we can see. So we've got cuttings, cutting, not much, yes, yes, no, not much, a bit, not much, yes, not much, quite a bit, quite a bit, quite a bit, quite a bit, not much, none, 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 none. The first diagnostic thing I can say is that it's cutting here, it's cutting here, and it's cutting here. That tells me that we have got the curve matched. If it was just cutting at either end, it might be that the rod was too flat. If it was cutting just in the middle, I might put too much of a curve into the truss rod. So that's sort of the first thing I need to ascertain. If I'm unsure at all about it, then I would recalibrate it and just try and use the little 3 feet and try it again. But I'm confident it's the right curve. So I'm just going to do a little bit more with this. And the question would be is, how do you know how much to do? Well, the first thing to say is, if you're at this stage on this guitar, I won't actually know if it's enough, and it's a bit of a kind of tricky thing to say, but if it was a guitar like many that I have, where there were some obvious choking notes up the fretboard, then this, we could put the string back in, take out the rubber spacer, and just go. Now, if previously we had a choked note like that, then we would know by hearing it that we'd leveled enough to free it up. If we still had a choked note, we'd carry on a little bit more leveling in that track. And it's so sensitive and precise that it only takes a couple of passes to get rid of most things. Now, oops, that's the wrong way around. Now I've done the first one, and I'm going to use, it's a habit of mine, but I used the same calibration for the second track, or the B track. And the reason why is I calibrate to the north, further away from me, of each string. So for the E string, I can't do that because I'll be off the fretboard. So I make the first calibration south of the E string, and I make it count for the B string as well. You have to do it at one point or other. So I use the same calibration for the B track. Now what I won't know yet is I'm aiming to get as level as possible using this tool, and it's only when I've done this track and probably the G track is when I'm going to start being able to test the bends and see if they're freed up a little bit more than they were previously, and that's what Si was getting stuck with some of the bends. Now interestingly, my diagnostic tells me we've got a really flat spot here, sorry, low spot. There's nothing cutting there at all. Everywhere else is cutting here, right up here, that's great. This isn't cutting at all, so we've quite often the case, and a low spot makes the next one high, because it's all relative. So you might have all of these perfectly level with each other, and lo and behold, a low one that might have been hammered in a bit too hard suddenly makes the one next to it, or the one after it, high. And if it doesn't matter that this is technically low here, because it's not touching the black pen at all, it's the only place that isn't, it's not cutting at all. These two are low and it will make that one effectively high, and to make it play properly, it's not a case in this one because it's not choking off, but if it was serious, substantial enough, you have to take everything down a little bit to kind of bottom out this one. And how far you go with it is definitely a judgment call. But what I'm seeing is, with this calibration, it's cutting everything nicely. Those are two low spots there, everything else is cutting, and we've got a really high spot here. This 13th fret is definitely, and interestingly, exactly what Si said. He's got some buzz and some fretting out above the 12th when he bends a string. So what you'll find is bending a string kind of around the 12th fret towards this 13th fret is probably going to cause problems. And there's another couple afterwards that are also a bit high. So there's a bit of hard work going on here at that point, which is kind of what we'd expect. Now at this point, well, I can put the string back in, it's still all under playing tension, and I can check each of the individual notes, which of course I want to make sure that everything individually plays which you hear it does, but I still won't. Now I have to see where I'm getting to. I'm taking the E string across into the territory of the G string. We haven't done the G slot yet. Okay, we've done the E and the B, and we need to do the G next. But when I push the E across into the G slot, it's choking out, and that's for several reasons. One is because there could be unevenness, and the sensitivity to the unevenness is exaggerated because on a radius that's curved, it means this string is coming from a lower point up the hill to this point here, and then going back to effectively a lower point over there. So it's got less clearance than the actual G string on its own has, going in a straight line down this track. Sounds a bit complicated. Sometimes at very low actions you just can't quite iron out every choke at a very low action, and sometimes it's a judgment call, and occasionally you have to decide that you're going to compromise and just back up the action a tiny fraction, because it's all about preserving fret life. If you wanted to, you could probably keep on hammering away with the leveler, but you've eventually got to decide whether you think you can afford the fret material. Is it worth the cost of the fret material, or would a half turn on the Allen, the grub screws down at the bridge, would that be a better solution? And really, you can't really know. There's a lot of variables involved in there. One, of course, being the condition of your frets to start out with. If they're old and worn, then you're not really going to have the luxury of keeping on going until you've cleared the whole of the sort of neck, so you can bend everywhere you like with impunity. Okay, so what I'm feeling on this thing here is that these spots here, this is number 13, is a very, very dodgy fret, and there are some out here as well. So and these low ones here, we're just about getting into them at the moment, so we might hear a tiny improvement. But remember what I said at the beginning, is that I've set the action as low as possible. So I've gone below what it was originally. I've gone down to 1mm here, so we've got room to back up to the 1.3 that Si had if we need to. So let's go down and better. Good. So you see it's clearing that G slot, or leveling that G slot has freed up those bends without having to go back up, and so we've now got this ambitious low action which could just work, and that's the aim. Now since I heard those notes play, I'm not going to do anything else to that. I'm not going to take any more down to attempt to bottom out these two that haven't been touched. Once you get the action playing once you get the frets playing adequately, including bends, at the action that you've chosen, the truth is you don't care if there's any residual unevenness below the action you've chosen. Right? It's academic. Who cares? You're not going anywhere near it because you've got the thing playing at the action you wanted, and you can afford to have some residual unevenness below that action, if you get what I'm saying. And as a result, you can just ignore it and move on. Now, of course, if somebody then says, I'm going to go from, I'm going to take it now from the 1 millimeter at the last fret on the high E, I'm going to push it down to 0.5 millimeter. Then, of course, you'll come into contact with the crinkly frets, the unevenness that we left deliberately in there. And we left it in there because there's no point removing precious fret metal just for the sake of being able to say we've actually got this completely level, even though it's level below a point at which we're actually playing it. That's a bit pointless. It's just a waste of fret metal. Okay. Tiny little bit of, I don't even know what you'd call it, zzz, there. So I'm just going to do a tiny bit more levelation in this track. Now, interestingly, the other thing I think that happened when Sean, who came over the other day, the other thing that happened with Sean is that he had reached a point with his levelling where he could see what looked to him like a terrifyingly big flat spot. And the truth is, on this guitar here, we've got one here on the 12th and the 13th fret, a couple of those here. They look really, really scary if you've not done this before. And in fact, you know, of course, that was the issue for Sean. It was the first time, and he was starting off with his nice new, practically new, what was the guitar? Les Paul Epiphone. So he ended up doing this, so he had a flat spot like that, which looks horrendous, okay? But we know from our method that this has to happen relative to all the others to make this play at a low action that most people want, and for the bends not to choke out and so on. So there's no real option if you want it to play that way. But of course Sean saw it and kind of thought, oh, this is it, I've killed the fret. And so, you know, quite sensibly he stopped at that point and asked for a bit of help or guidance, and you know, and he was able to then see that actually you can go to a point where it looks pretty extreme, but actually it isn't. You know, it's not as bad as it looks. So, but again, it's also, it's telling you when you see that kind of cut pattern or cut telltale cut marks, I suppose, it's telling you that that's quite a significantly uneven fret, or a couple of frets in the whole sequence of things. So psi, you know, that's what's been getting in the way of your bends, even though the actual frets themselves look pretty nice and the guitar felt like it played brilliantly. You know, at the playing level it was fine, but actually it was that residual unevenness was getting in the way of you bending. Okay. So sometimes when you're doing this, you've also got to remember that if you've had to take off not a lot, but a fair amount to free up these bends, you've got to sort of follow through a bit. You can't just stop. You know, you might say, well, I'm never going to bend this note right up to here, but if you stop, you're going to have a difference in profile on the fret, really. bit of, a little bit more on that one. Again, the amount you do is something that comes with experience and trial and error, really. You're constantly evaluating it and looking for that sort of point. Do I need to stop? Do I need to pull it out at this point? And you know, and occasionally you'll just go, I'm not going to do any more. I'm going to stop here. And we're either going to live with it, or if we can't live with it, we'll just raise the action a tiny amount just to clear it. And that's the beauty of the action. The last last move of raising the action, it does make a massive difference with a tiny little adjustment. Yeah, that's good. Then sometimes you'll get to a place where you hear the tiniest of little, just as you're almost done, and I've got used to recognizing that that's the point at which you can stop the leveling, and you kind of know that the polishing process will take care of that last 100th of a millimetre or whatever it is that is getting in the way. So we're pretty much almost there. I'm just going to be careful, I don't want to break off the end of the nut until we've reshaped it. I don't want to break it off after that. But we're on the last track now, and I'm just sort of guiding it. Again, as little downward force as possible, really. It's just want to move it under gravity. Tip it a little bit towards the end so that we're not going to leave a kind of sharp lip on the frets. Again, just guiding it, letting weight and gravity do the work. And the beauty of this is it'll cut most where it has to, and you don't have to target it. The curve, the two curves sitting together, yeah, they do the work. So I think this is finished. And you can see it's cut a fair bit of metal, so we're going to need to round it off, reprofile. Tiniest. I'm going to do one more tiny little bit, knowing there's a little tiny bit up the top there, but we are going to be done after that. I'm using my rope to pull that off. And my string spreader is just a piece of rubber, so there's a little bit hint of a buzz up there, so I'm not going to press down up there, I'm just going to look at it, and I think that the looking will direct the cutting sandpaper where it should go. One of the things I often will always do when somebody asks me if I could refurbish an old 70s guitar or something like that, I'll always ask them what, get me a close-up of the frets. And it's one of those things I would always encourage you, if you're buying guitars on eBay or anywhere really, get the seller to take you a clear close-up picture of the frets. And if they won't do it, walk away from it, because especially if it's an older guitar, but even a newer one can have that problem. I was going to get, I was going to get my camera, but it will make a noise bleeping. I can see there's a lot of unevenness here that we've now cut out, and it's quite pronounced actually. It's much more than I thought there was when I first felt it as a neck, because the neck feels great, but it was very definitely not behaving. There's a lot of unevenness. Okay, so you can, I don't know if you can see from there, but there's a lot of flattened frets now to a degree, and we're going to have to reshape those, which is part of the process. I think this is better. I think that's quite a bit better actually. Yeah, we'll undo this for a second. Hold it there a second. Just take your little flying visit down these frets. Hopefully you can see the amount of various different amounts of work. So, you know, those two really stomped on at the edges. This one quite heavily over across the middle. That one not so much at all. That one really heavily across there. That's the 13th, fabled 13th fret. That one hardly at all there and there, hardly at all there. This one here quite a lot, this one here quite a lot, that one not so much. So you can see that the system, or the method, kind of knows what has to happen. You don't have to do the thinking about it. The tool kind of takes care of it. But that's quite a lot of work to get that to bend. So this is the fun bit. We can now take off the strings and clean up a little bit, and also we can take care of the nut. Now I'm just looking at the time. It's 1900s. I think I'm going to probably take a break from this, so I'll take this off first. I'll get rid of these strings. We don't need them anymore. The sort of they've served their purpose. I've got some more new ones ready lined up to go, so I can take these off. I'll save them because they're useful for me to use as sacrificial strings on the next or another guitar. I tend to have loads of sets of Les Paul sacrificial strings for some reason, and tend to be short on Strats and Tele length. Okay, but to do that I'll have to kind of go into a boring straightening out the coily bits, otherwise it will be difficult to get them through the holes and ever get them through the body of anything else again. Just a quick thing on here, this bridge is designed to work as a back-loaded one as well, and although the guitar already has the through body stringing, I'm not sure it's a great thing to have through body stringing. Kind of people like it, a lot of people seem to like it, but for what I've heard and read, and it seems to make sense to me, that the truth is that, or seems to be, that the more string you have behind the bridge, whether it's through the body or down into a tailpiece, the less sustain you've got. So if you're interested in changing it around and experimenting with getting more sustain, next time you might, oh, you probably know this, but I mean, if you're somebody watching and you haven't tried it, you might want to string it from the back of this kind of Wilkinson ashtray bridge, and see if you can detect a change in the amount of sustain. I'm not sure my ears would be clever enough to know the difference, but some people have measured it and swear by it. But it's I think you can really hear it on some of those old jazz guitars, like the old arch tops, and I don't know what the number of guitars are, but there's the old jazz numbers, and you can really hear the shortness of the notes. Partly sometimes they're muted deliberately, but also just on their own, all of that loads of string going behind the bridge. Okay, so we have done the fret leveling. Now we've got a load of frets that are flattened along the top to varying degrees, and they look like pretty, I'd say they were jumbo-ish frets on this thing. So I'm going to take my StewMac crowning file, but it's really a reprofiling file, and I'm going to run it down each fret, and the idea is I'm going to take off the flattened edges, and the marker pen purpose is to show me, as I'm cutting inwards and taking off those flat edges, I'm getting reducing the size of the marker pen strip down the middle, and my aim is to keep going with this tool until I've got the thinnest possible strip of pen left down the middle. And the reason for leaving that little strip down the middle is to be able to say, well, I've rounded the fret again to make it into a nice arch form, but I haven't touched the top of it because I don't want to change its relative levelness compared in relation to all the others. So a way of avoiding changing its height is to avoid touching the top. So this file is designed to miss the top out. Now, the more heavily flattened the fret is, the longer you can see I'm having to spend on it to reshape it. And what you just, I don't know if you probably can't see, but working the edges is where it can't help, the profile of the tool can't help but round off the edges, and that's where that the picture I drew earlier on, it gives you that telltale sort of rounding off, and the rounding off has sort of rounded off the flat spot that we originally left. So this isn't the first time these frets have been levelled or worked on. And it wouldn't be at all surprising that for a custom neck manufacturer that they may well have done it themselves in the factory. You know, it would be something I would expect of a quality bespoke manufacturer of necks. Not necessarily something I'd expect from a factory production, but you know, a sort of mass production. From a boutique supplier, if somebody trying to stand out, you'd think they might do it. But if they did do it, they probably did it with a neck passively flattened off the guitar, off the body, which is the sort of conventional way of doing it. So each fret has a slightly different patterns of cut on it, and I'm just doing my best to round them off whilst concentrating more or less on the bits that were flattened, and trying to vary the amount of filing I'm doing on the bits that aren't flattened. You can do this with a three-sided file. It just takes longer, but it's actually more accurate. So this tool, even though this tool is a lot more expensive, it's really about convenience and speed. But even so, you know, 3 times this length of time isn't exactly too long, especially if you're only doing 1 or 2 guitars every year or so. If you do it all the time, saving a bit of time does then become sort of important. Okay, so once I've done this, I go into the sanding and well, next major step will be the sanding and polishing step, where I just clean up all of these marks. It looked to me on this guitar before I did the levelling, actually I kind of go back, it had the look of frets that had been levelled and crowned with the tool like this. What's that stuck to there? Crowned and levelled with the tool like this, but not polished, which is, you know, not great. So I could still see the telltale signs. Well, not polished thoroughly, because by the time I finished with this, the polishing process is not just about making it shiny, it's actually about blending in these little lines, little flat strips on the top. It's about kind of rounding those off with the least reduction of height possible. And you probably should be difficult to spot it once it's thoroughly done. So I think the previous, either the manufacturer or whoever had previously levelled it, had just possibly stopped short of sanding it and polishing it. Or maybe gone into a process of shining it up but without fully polishing it all off. Okay, so that's our re-profiling done. Like I say, I'll sort of save you from having to listen to the next couple of bits, which are just a bit dreary. So that's going to involve sanding, a process of sanding with different grades of sandpaper to get these into a really nice, smooth, rounded frets again. Just to get them into playing condition. And I'll do that with sandpaper, various grades of sandpaper, followed by some Autosol chrome cleaner. Other chrome cleaners are available. And once I've done that, or at the same time, or just before that, I'll also reshape this. And then what I'll do is I'll take the bits off and have a look at what kind of storage capacity we've got for lead. And then I'll come back around about that time when it's time to restring it, or either put some lead in and or restring it. Because the great thing about this setup now, having done that precision fret leveling, is the precision work in a way is done. The action we've set in the beginning is still dialed in. The neck relief is going to return to exactly where it was before once we put the same gauge of strings back on. And the nut slots are going to stay at the same depth, which means the first fret action, when everything's back under load, will revert to the height we had it. So you can take the neck off, you can do anything you want at this point, but when you reload the neck, providing it's bolted back into the same place, when you reload the neck, and provided you haven't dialed up or messed around the action, it's all going to go back into that exact same setup that we had it just now. So it's nice that the hard work in a way is done, and we can now get into the sort of finishing touches. And the final step after all of that, once we've balanced it, once we've got the neck oiled, restrung, all the stretch taken out of the strings, make sure the nut slots are running smoothly and everything's staying perfectly in tune. Once all that's done, then the final move is setting the intonation. So I'll see you back for the bit where these are all shined up and we're ready to stick some lead into the cavities. Okay, as if by magic, look, oh, we're suddenly back. So it's done. So what I did, because I was listening to any questions, because it's, you know, inauguration day and I just couldn't resist working. I've done 4 guitars today, so I had to get this one finished. What you missed out was just the polishing part. I've oiled the fretboard, I've reshaped the nut, which you can see there, and I've restrung it, obviously. I've taken, while I was listening to the radio, I took this, had a look at what available spaces we had. There's no space under there. Sometimes you have a bigger cutout on here, but there's none available on this one. It's absolutely cut precisely to fit the pickup and nothing else. This may have a bit more room under there, but there was no way of getting it out because it's been put on and wired really tightly into here. The only space available was here, and what I've done is I've put a block of lead, which is 2.5 inches long by 3/4 of an inch, no, half an inch thick, right into the bottom. So you've got the switch at this end, and then the space underneath the pots, just up to where the jack plug socket comes in, has got this plug of lead in there, and it's wrapped in Gorilla Tape. So it just literally won't go anywhere. It's just sitting tight. It's quite pressed in there. It's just exactly the right size to fit in and squeeze down to the bottom. And so you can see it's in there. Now it just adds a little tiny bit more weight. It's not perfect, but there's nowhere else on this guitar. You know, if it was an absolute priority another time, or, you know, if there's no other way, then you could route something out under here and put lead in here. But, you know, alternatively you could, you know, potentially put some, you know, steel bar into here or something like that, or lead shot into here and then fill the holes. But, you know, that's quite extreme. Sorry, fill with dowel, that's what I meant. Anyway, the point is that's done. Just for your info, Si, I don't know if you know, but the 2 inner screws on the plate here have been badly worn at some point in the past. So I don't know what the history of this guitar is, but there's some little things like that. All the other screws are okay, but these 2 middle ones have been quite badly scuffed, knackered around the top. So just because I haven't got any replacements for that, unfortunately, but just keep an eye out, and if you ever get a chance, you might want to replace those. So having done that, like I say, it's just a tiny bit different in balance. The other thing I did was I just repositioned the neck slightly. It's just a little bit better balance than it was before in terms of strings sitting on the neck. So we're now at that stage of there's only a couple of things left to do. First one is to stretch out all the stretch from the strings, and then I had to move these obviously I haven't changed the height, they're still at the same action we had, but I had to move them forward to get to the screws, which is, I don't know if maybe that's what's been hiding. It's the two worn out screws have been put in the middle, probably to sort of just disguise them underneath there. I don't know if that's what you did, but anyway. So I just got to obviously re-intonate this, which is no problem anyway, that's what I normally do. Of course these things are sort of variable, you can move the strings around, so it's always down to, there's no set grooves on there, so it's down to wherever you kind of move them to. So I'll intonate those, stretch out all the slack now, and then we'll be done. And I think, oops, sorry, about something down. I think the neck's looking great compared to what it was before. I mean, it's really soaked up that oil. I've kept the wire, the string going around the split peg to a minimum. I usually run about, what's that, 1.5 inches after the peg, and then that leaves usually about 2 loops around it, 2 and a bit, or 3 loops at most, but it keeps the amount of stuff stored up on there to a minimum. Now the question that originally you asked in your note, Si, is should we put on another string tree, and I'm not sure it needs it. Like I said, the string tree is a sort of a bit of a recipe for tuning. Whoa, that was interesting. Why did that? That's very interesting. Something wasn't seated properly and it jumped forward. Yeah, it's a recipe for tuning problems in my book. When I do this pair here, I tend to try and do them together, so they both lift up the string tree at the same time. I think this E string is going to break. I think that's what it's telling me. I think it's unwinding. Watch this space. Sometimes you get it, once in a while. Look at that. Well, we'll see, but that doesn't sound healthy to me. We'll see. Right. So I'm going to just go back and carry on stretching out these strings, and this is where the E string will go, if that's what's going to happen. So the thing I go on about a lot of times on a lot of videos is the importance of this stretching exercise. And I keep getting asked questions. People say, oh, I saw so and so saying they just tune it up half a step, leave it in the cupboard, and then they come back a week later and it's tuned back down to normal, and that's it, away they go. And the truth is that's probably what does happen, but I can promise you, if they brought the guitar to me and I yanked the strings, I would pull a whole load of slack out of it still, and then what would happen is it would detune. So it isn't, the slack isn't out, it's just stabilised, but it's not, if you bend it, it'll go out of tune. And before you play, you want to stretch all of the slack out. So usually I do cut 2 or 3 of those bends, and then I do some pulling just to get it pretty much all as stretched as possible, followed by some bends, which on 10s my fingers aren't very strong, so I won't get as much bending out of a 10s as you will. The idea is to keep going until there's no more slack, no more detuning. This is also the perfect time to listen for pings on the nut. Feeling good. It's feeling very good. I'm very pleased with that. Yeah, the only downside is I didn't have anything heavier than lead. Otherwise we could have just solved that problem with the weight altogether, but it's improved anyway. Like I said, I'm going to take this indoors in a little while, and what I'll do is I'll just play it a little bit more and stretch the final dregs of slack out. But there's the 2 components of tuning stability are your nut slots and your slack in your strings. And if you, I'm going to need a strap. And if you want the guitar to stay in tune, you've got to take care of both of those. So in the setup process, you saw me take care of the nut slots through that process, and also through listening out now continually for any pinging, in which case if we hear pinging it means the strings are being gripped, and that alone will mess up the tuning and drive you mad. So if you take care of that, and then the other thing you take care of is getting all the stretch out of the strings, then that will lead to perfect stable tuning. Now I'm just going to switch to airplane mode so that I can use the tuner on here. And I'm just going to expect this to need doing because I moved the saddles, so I do expect there to be an adjustment needed, but we shall see. I don't know how. Let's move this so you can see the tuner. Okay, so when I put the lead in, by the way, I checked everything was working, which it is. So I'm on a clean tone, no effects or anything, just to do the intonation. So I'm going to intonate using the harmonic, tuning to the harmonic ping. And if there's still a bit of stretch to come out, we might as well get rid of it as well. Aha, no, I think I heard a ping at the nut. So I will make with the sandpaper and the blade in a minute. Now the idea is, once we've tuned at the harmonic, if this string is the correct length for the neck, then the fretted note at the 12th fret will be the same. So it's sharp, which means we need to pull it back. Now we only get to intonate these in pairs, so what I can do with this is pull it back by tightening this clockwise, and I'll get a different screwdriver for this, make sure it's exactly the right one. This is not a very good condition nut head as well on this one. So this is going to put it sharp, so we need to retune. theoretically, if we get the E done in this pair, then the A will also be done, since they're pre-compensated in relation to each other. But we can only adjust them together as a pair. There's a whole lot of people have different views on this, and some people get really upset if you don't use a very expensive tuner, etc, etc. Now, the thing you should know about this, you should be able to see, it should be obvious, is that everybody's the way everybody frets a note is different. Everyone uses different pressure, and everybody uses a different pressure every other time. So not only is there no consistency between two people's fingering of a note, there isn't even internal consistency between how I do it one day and another. So really, this idea of you have to have £1,000 tuner for something that I can vary just depending on how this variable is so unstable in the equation. It just makes a mockery of spending £500 on a tuner. Anyone who talks about that is barking up the wrong tree. What I tend to do is I do a series of takes, and if on the majority like that they are exactly an octave and in tune, then I call it done. Now do the A, that should be in, but because they're paired together, it's going to have to be a compromise between the two if they're not exactly compensated right. So I'll give that a little tug as well. See, the A is going sharper than the E, so they are not exact, so that means the compensation between the two of them is not an exact science, so I'm going to have to balance it between the two. If you had 6 individual saddles, you'd be alright, but these are paired, so you have to take a median basically. Pretty good, I'll live with that. And we know that's going to be sharp, so I'm going to drag these back a little bit. And we're all pretty far back to begin with, so I'll give them all a pull backwards to start off with, since we know that's where we're pretty much going to be. There should be some difference between them, so I'll start with a bit. Sharp. Sharp means the string is too short, the playing length is too short, so we need to pull the saddle back to increase the length of the string. Still a little sharp. I'll do the G as well, just to see how the difference is between the two. The G's spot on. I'm going to go section backwards, but that's it. There's a balance between the two. Okay, let's go B. E's looking sharp, to bring that back a bit. And a ping on the E as well, I think, worth taking care of. So these are pretty much in a line. I mean, they're close. There's still a stagger backwards. B is pinging. There you go, it's interesting, isn't it? E's going to be sharp. B's a tiny bit sharp, but not as much as the E, so we're going to have to go somewhere in between the two. Right, let's give them all a bit of a tug and try them again from the bottom up. Right, I'm just going to make a note. So low E pinging. So here are both the E and the A pinging slightly. That means they're still sticking in the slot, despite having used oversized files. Okay, E, A and D, that's all of them then. E, A and D. All of them except G. So that's interesting. D is slightly sharp, G is slightly flat, so that's the mid-ground between the two of them. Not much we can do about that. The pinging, I don't know whether it's the string tree. so the pair there doesn't really work either. It's the way it is. Compromise between all of them. It's not going to be bad, but it's not. I prefer. I know it's vintage look I like, but I do prefer the 6 singles if you're going to intonate them properly. So we've still got stretch coming out anyway, so that's okay. We keep on pulling it and bending notes and stuff for a bit longer yet. Marvellous. Okay, I'm going to stop there. That's as close as we're going to get with the intonation, given the nature of the beast. So, just to summarise, I'm going to do a couple more things, but I'll do them off camera. Just to quickly summarise, what have we done? We have done a complete fret levelled full setup. I have put some lead into there to balance the weight. Ooh, you've got a loose thingy. I'm going to do that up as well. I've slightly repositioned the neck so you've got the better alignment of the strings, oiled the fingerboard, polished the frets, obviously levelled and polished the frets, softened the edges, replaced the nut, cut it down, yeah, that's it, and intonated it as best you can do with 3 paired thingies. Okay, and you know, sounds great. It's at the lowest action, it's lower than it originally came to me, so it's currently on 1.5 and about 1. So you have some room to go up a little tiny bit if you want to, but I quite like it the way it is. But you know, all you need is the little 1.5mm what's it. So like I said, there are a couple of tiny little things I'll do off camera, but I'll just tell you what they are. First one is I'm going to just get a little piece of sandpaper 600 grit and I'm going to just widen the slots slightly with the sandpaper. Then I'm going to put some graphite powder in there just as a final lubricant, and then I'm going to tighten up the jack plug socket for you, and that's it, done. There you go. Mustard Guitars Telecaster setup. Hope you enjoy it. There you go. Thanks for spending time with Real Love Guitars. I'll see you again soon.